Once you have installed the Remote Desktop Commander suite and configured it to successfully collect data from your session hosts, you have a decision to make. Specifically, do you want to deploy the Remote Desktop Commander agent service onto your session hosts? Deploying the agent service on your session hosts expands the types of data Remote Desktop Commander can collect, report on, and present to you in the form of expanded dashboards and features. However, it requires significantly more space in your SQL database, so you'll first need to verify that you have the space required to do so. If you have more than 2 session hosts you are monitoring with Remote Desktop Commander in order to collect agent data, you must have Remote Desktop Commander linked to a full version of Microsoft SQL or Microsoft Azure SQL, both of which can store greater amounts of data than SQL Express, which is limited to 10 gigabytes. What additional information do you gain by deploying our agent service? Well, you can start reviewing per user session and per process performance information to see which users and programs are most impacting performance on your terminal servers. You can also track inbound and outbound TCP and UDP connections by process and user session, which is useful for incident response, e.g., what programs are opening up what communication channels inside and outside your network. For more intensive user monitoring, you can also turn on screenshot recording and window caption recording on a per-user basis. So let's see this agent information in action. In the current performance and load across the farm dashboard, I can select a host, expand the recent user sessions on the host, and view performance details about the user session on that host. In this case, I'm reviewing the performance of a services session. I can scroll through minute-by-minute agent captures to see what service processes spiked CPU and memory, and when. Or, let's say a user reported a performance problem during a specific time frame. I can pull up the historical performance and load across the farm dashboard, zero in on the day and time when there was an issue, and then see all of the user sessions on the relevant servers and the resources they were consuming. I can then jump into a high resource consuming session and isolate out the process that was using elevated resources. As mentioned earlier, the Remote Desktop Commander agent can also collect TCP and UDP activity by process. When I view a user session, I can see which processes communicated with what internal and external resources over what hosts. In fact, in the User Session Review menu, I can search for user sessions that have opened communications over those specific ports. Some organizations have more intensive user activity monitoring needs depending on their industry and regulatory requirements. If you have the Remote Desktop Commander agent deployed, you can turn on window caption and screenshot recording for specific users or all users who are members of an Active Directory group. Window caption recording, which can be summarized by user in daily or weekly reports, gives you more context as to what users are doing in their sessions. Screenshot recordings then provide you with a visual history of what users are working on in their sessions. Remote Desktop Commander offers other useful dashboards that can present agent data in different ways. For instance, the CPU use by application dashboard can show you the individual programs that were using the most CPU on your hosts in a specific time frame. Similarly, the average and peak memory used by application dashboards can show you the programs utilizing the most memory at given times of day. If you've now decided you want to deploy the Remote Desktop Commander agent, launch the Remote Desktop Commander configuration tool and go to the Polling and Agents tab. Next, determine if you want to do any screenshot or window caption recording of specific users. If you do, create a group in your Active Directory and place any users in this group who will receive advanced user monitoring. Then tell Remote Desktop Commander about that group. Note, if you don't want to do screenshot and window caption recording, feel free to skip this step. Now we're going to deploy the Remote Desktop Commander agent to the specific session host that we want. Click the Agent Tuning and Deployment Wizard button at the top right. This is the best way to install, update, and remove agents from session hosts, as well as adjust agent settings later when you need to. The first thing we need to determine is the agent and master service polling frequency. More frequent polls increase data granularity, but they can also greatly increase the volume of data in your SQL Server. For most organizations with 50 or fewer session hosts, the light setting shown here will be a good balance of agent polling granularity and database storage requirements. Organizations with more than 50 hosts should move the slider to the lighter polling setting. Next, let's adjust the advanced agent settings. If you're not interested in logging the network connections between processes and computers in your RDS and AVD environments, you can check the Do Not Collect TCP and UDP connection data option, which will save some SQL storage space. If you keep your session hosts rather busy with lots of concurrent users and high CPU usage, you should check the Operate in Turbo Mode option so that our agent can keep up with all the activity taking place on your hosts. Finally, the default number of 50 concurrent users should be high enough for most RDS and AVD environments. However, if you run session hosts such as remote app servers with more than 50 concurrent users, raise this number to the peak number of users your session hosts handle. Once you've configured the agent settings and polling intervals exactly the way you want, you can change those settings, deploy or redeploy the agent with those settings, or uninstall the agents on some or all of your monitored hosts. Click the Select Computers to modify if you want to change, deploy, or remove the agents from only some of your hosts. Finally, click Apply Changes when you are ready, and Remote Desktop Commander will start the operations against the hosts you have selected. Since we've just installed Remote Desktop Commander, I'm going to choose the Deploy Agents option to install, configure, and start the agents on my monitored hosts. Once all deployment operations have finished, click the Close and Exit Wizard button to restart the primary Remote Desktop Reporter service, and voila! You now have the agent service running on your hosts. As a reminder, in order for Remote Desktop Commander to deploy its agent remotely, reconfigure its settings, or remove it, Windows Remote Management must be enabled on all of the monitored hosts. WinRM is enabled by default on most server operating systems, but it's not enabled by default on workstations. Follow the instructions in the Remote Desktop Commander Agent Deployment Guide to enable WinRM manually or via group policy on your workstations. After you have run the polling rate and agent tuning wizard, wait about 10 minutes. Then open the Remote Desktop Commander client. If the master Remote Desktop Reporter service has been in successful communication with its agent services, you should now see the agent data present in the various dashboards discussed in this video. It can take as much as 10 minutes for this data to sync up, so please give it time. If for any reason you do not see the agent data, make sure that the main Remote Desktop Reporter Services domain account it operates under has local administrator rights on each session host, as this is vital. Likewise, make sure that the Remote Service Management Windows Firewall exception is enabled on each session host. Finally, after you've been collecting agent data for about a day, go back into the Database tab in the Remote Desktop Commander Configuration tool. Here you can see available free space, which gives you an idea about how quickly database space is being consumed. You can always adjust the retention intervals for your agent data down to reduce database growth. The default is 3 days, which provides a nice balance of performance history compared to database size. Lastly, you can run an agent polling diagnostics report during business hours to see how long it is taking the agent service to collect data on each of your session hosts, how long it takes to transmit the data over the network, and how many objects get transferred per poll on average. If agent collection and transfer time is taking longer than 20 seconds in total, consider rerunning the polling rate and agent tuning wizard to choose a less frequent polling interval.
One final note, if for any reason you cannot deploy the agents automatically via WinRM, due to firewall policies, managing systems outside the primary Windows domain where Remote Desktop Commander is installed, or other similar reasons, you can consult the Agent Deployment Guide to learn how to manually install and configure the agent on those systems. Congratulations! Remote Desktop Commander is now fully set up and configured. Happy monitoring and managing your RDS or AVD environment.